Hi everyone, it's Andy from Hobby Headquarters. Today we're going to be building our stream diorama. This was a great project that I had a lot of fun building. We got to use our handmade trees that you got to see in a video previously, as well as using water effect and dirt and static grass and bushes, all other kinds of cool stuff. This was, like I said, a lot of fun to do, and this is going to be the first of many more dioramas. So let's get started on it. Okay, to start out, we have our hardwood board. It does have a rough edge that probably wouldn't look as good, but once we get the entire base done, I can always build a framework around it of molding to cover up all of the edge. The board we're using here is 24 inches by 11 1/4 inches. That's what they had at the Home Depot when I went in there. Also picked up some of the high density pink foam that we're going to lay onto it here. Now my idea for this video is that I'm going to have a stream, and the stream is going to bisect the board here, approximately here, and this will be the other side. I also plan on having kind of a shallow area where when the stream gets really high, this kind of fills up. And I've been looking at pictures of European streams, and this will all be rocking through here. Also, I plan on having through here, this will be another second level, so it'll be a little bit higher, and this has got a little bit of a side edge going up. And then the kind of the trail that we have will kind of be going through here. Maybe a little bit about that side. And these are all just rough drawings I'm putting on it right now, because we're going to carve all this foam out. So now that we have all that into place, let's carve out the foam, and then we can get to gluing it onto the base. And the pink foam cuts real easily. So we're going to cut this right here. And we're going to sand down this level to keep it so it still has a little bit more depth, a little more height than the center of the river. And then we'll cut down this area too. Okay, and once I cut those, we just snap those off. And now we'll take this and add this over to here. This is going to act as our edge. And it's a matter of snapping that off. Okay, now that we have the general surface that we want, we can still do some more fine refining with the sandpaper in a little while. I've roughed up the back of the foam here, and we're going to use some Gorilla Glue, which works good on all these kind of surfaces. Now the foam in that glue expands by quite a bit, so we're going to have to put some weight down on it. And that's when a tiger track comes in really handy. Because if it moves with a 60-pound tiger track on it, then it is way stronger than I thought. So we're going to let that set up for about a couple hours and come back, take it off, and then we can do some refining sanding on it. Okay, now that the foam has all set up and all this is all glued down tight, we can now use our Sculptamold, and we've mixed up a little batch of that, and we're going to start applying it to the surfaces. So I let the plaster dry after we smoothed it out, but just before it was completely dry, I pressed some tiger tracks into the dirt. We also carved out a little bit of erosion lines going down on the side of this edge here, and then I just painted a dark brown color for the base of the lake, or excuse me, the stream. So now that we have that on, we're going to put a coat of paint over all of this, and this is basically going to seal this up to keep all the white from showing, because we're going to put more product on top of that. So we're going to use some Woodland Scenics, just their base paint. It's just a dark color paint, and I'm going to give this just a spritz down with water. Now that the undercoat has dried, we're mixing up water 50-50 with Mod Podge, the matte finish. And we're going to mix that up really well and give it a liberal coat over the entire model, and making sure you're getting into all the little nooks and crannies. Now when I say entire model too, everything except for the stream bed, we want that to remain smooth when we actually put our water effect on it. Another reason that I like to use Mod Podge instead of like a white glue is white glue has a tendency to set up a little quicker. This gives you a few more minutes to actually coat the entire diorama before it starts to set up. Now that we have the piece entirely coated, what I'm using right here is a little sanded grout that I picked up at a home improvement store, and just using a little shaker, we're going to go over and make sure we coat the entire surface that we want to have the coating on complete, and really putting all over the place. And don't worry about getting any on the riverbed. You can actually just wipe that off later, and that's why we want to make sure there was no glue in that area. Now that we have the entire surface coated, what I like to do on this would take the Mod Podge again, but this time 3-to-1 water, and mix it up in a squirt bottle and mist it on over the entire surface. This way we get a nice solid surface, and then the texture is going to be really firm. And after you let the grout dry for a couple hours, you'll get a nice hard surface on there, really hard to break through into the white base that's underneath. You'll also notice that I've placed one of the pre-made trees that I have. I have a video on my channel as well that shows how to make these from scratch. And now that it is completely dry, we're going to take our airbrush using multiple colors of brown, starting with the darkest first and working to the light. We're going to start to add some highlights to the riverbanks as well as to the tracks. Okay, I finished up the airbrush effect that I wanted to get on some of the darker areas to make them look a little wetter. then some of the top areas would be a little dry, as well as the tracks. I also I started doing a little test on some static grass. I have a new static grass applicator and putting some weeds and stuff on, and forgot to film this part before I started putting that stuff on as my test bed, but kind of give you a little 360. I've also attached the tree into place using some Gorilla Glue, and I've just started the process of filling in the areas on there, but it is attached really nicely and firmly. And what we'll do now is we're going to start working on weeds, grass, and things like that, and dead leaves, all that kind of stuff. We want to do all that stuff before we start working on the water. That way none of it falls into the water and ruins our surface on it. Okay, now we're going to work on a little bit of our grass and weeds. And to start off, I'm just going to work on this area up here. And we're just using a little Mod Podge, thin with just a little touch of water in it, just to make it flow a little bit easier. And I'm going to kind of do it in a blotting area. Next, what I've been doing now too is I've been taking one of my grass mats that we got from MIG a while back, and you're able to pull the little tufts off of these bunches of weeds. Now I already actually have a few, so what we'll be doing now is just taking a few of these little weeds and pushing them into place just randomly over the entire surface. Next, we're going to use our static grass applier, and we're going to put a little bit of grass all into this area as well. Now we'll let that dry for a little while, set up, and come back and we'll vacuum off and blow off the rest of the excess grass and show you what it looks like. Decided to put some more trees, some medium size, not as large as this one right here. So I poked a little hole into our foam base, and I used a little bit of Mod Podge as a fixer to it. And we're going to glue this deep inside there. We'll let that dry, and then we'll do any little touch-up we need around it. Okay, as you can see here, I've gone ahead and I've put the first coat of our Vallejo water texture down, acrylic water texture. I dammed up both sides of the stream here with masking tape, and it held back the fluid pretty well. Now I had a little bit of a white start to form, and I may have been because I may have poured a little bit too thick on the water portion of it. But all of this is going to be covered with water plants anyway, and we're also going to put multiple layers down on this now. So for the next layer, I'm going to mix maybe a dot or two of acrylic paint into it to kind of darken it so it's not so crystal clear. Okay, as you can see, I've poured actually 2 layers of water in there. The very first layer of water I put in there, and I got a little bit of white hazing on it when I put it in there. So what I did is I went over with a little bit of green dye, poured it in there, kind of rippled, and then a little brown around the edges, and then poured one more layer of the clear water from Woodland Scenics. So I am going to do one more layer on top of that to give it a little bit of depth. But what I thought I would do right now is we're going to grass in this area with some tall field grass. So I've got a big container, some taller field grass we're going to go ahead and use. And we're going to get it set up and use our static and see what comes out like. So applying a layer of Mod Podge onto the dirt area. And it's just a touch of extra water in it, just so it flows a little bit easier than just the thickness that the Mod Podge comes in. Now, I want this to be more of a field, so I'm going to apply one big uniform coat over the entire little area, as well as some areas up on the top of the hill and the other side of the riverbank as well. now I'm taking my static grass sifter and touching a wire probe to the actual glue. We're shaking on Knox 12 millimeter long grass, and we want more of like a long rough meadow looking on the edge of the road. Now I've let the glue sit up now for a couple hours, enough that it's firm. So what I've done now is I've taken a vacuum and just gone over it lightly over the tops, just pulling off any of the excess grass through these areas. Now I also, before I did that, took a few little tufts, and I just did the tufts by grabbing a little pinch of the long grass and dipping it into glue. Now there's a little bit of white there. That's the Mod Podge. It's going to dry clear. And we've also added some bushes up into these areas and bushes in here. And on top of that, we sprayed a little Mod Podge water mixture. And then this is a product that's just called Weeds. I'll kind of just sprinkle a little bit. It's basically a crush type foam. And we can even take this stuff and sprinkle it on top of our grasses. And it adds a little variation in color and texture. And most of it just sinks right inside there. And it's held in place pretty well just because it falls in between the blades of grass. Now, like I said, on top of the weeds, we did put a little bit of the glue just so it'll stick. And it'll give it a variation in color as well. Also in the back over here, we took a fallen tree branch, put it into the water as if it's being flown downstream, and then hit the side of the stream. Also decided I'm going to make a little leaf litter, and this is accomplished just by taking real leaves, real dead leaves that are out in front of my store here, and smashing them up and just putting them through a sifter. And you'll get this real fine, looks like dead leaves in here that we'll just sprinkle underneath all the trees. You can even put some up around the riverbank, things like that. And what I thought I would also do is just give you one more quick little view. I'm not going to be doing any more work on this tonight. I'm going to let this fully cure overnight. But I thought it looked really cool to get an eye level view of the grass, how it's all sticking up, as well as leading right down into the water. The water has a natural rippling effect that looks actually really well, especially with the light reflecting off of it. Between the grass and the river effects, it's turning out pretty well. Now, what I am going to do, I've been going back and forth on it, and I think I am going to put one more layer of water inside of this, just to rise up the water a little bit higher, make it meet all of these river grasses that I put in here as well. And after we do that, if we decide, we can even put more rippling on it, and then we can show you a technique using the gloss Mod Podge, which I think I probably will, because I do want to have a little bit of motion appearing in the water, as if it is moving, not fast, but that it is actually moving rather than stagnant water. So I've gone ahead and poured the second coat of water on top here, and just as it was starting to get tacky, I took some of our ground up leaf mixture and kind of spread it around the edges in between these weeds and up around and back and through here too, especially next to that deadfall tree. Kind of put some in there because you can imagine weeds or leaves and debris all accumulating over in the corner. Now, while the water was drying, we went ahead and took some of our fine leaf foliage from Woodland Scenic, some of these branches. They kind of look like they're moss covered, and we're going to put those into place, areas like that. Kind of glue them down, of course, too, but kind of make it look like there's branches that have fallen off trees. And also went ahead and sprinkled some fine ballast all around the side edges of the road. It's kind of giving a layer effect. Now I've gone over it slightly with my airbrush just to kind of blend it all in so nothing looks too stark against another color. Okay, now I've flipped the diorama around. So this is the back of the diorama. And I do have a small amount of wakes in the water right now, but I want to create a little bit more motion in the water. So we're going to use our Mod Podge, but this time we're going to use a gloss. And what we want to do now is start stippling it on, not very thick, just working in small areas. Okay, now after you've completed about 2 or 3 inches of the Mod Podge area on the diorama, you want to take your airbrush set at about 20 pounds of pressure and then just lightly start to push the product down the river as if it's flowing down. And what this will do is it'll start to create little wakes that'll give the appearance of moving water. And like I was saying, you don't want to do too much at a time, because it does start to set up and get tacky and it won't want to move at all. So just do little small areas. You might want to experiment on something first before you start putting it onto your river. I'm making some little clump trees. I'm using Woodland Scenics fine leaf foliage, and I've just sprayed it with a little bit of our Mod Podge, which is with a little water in it. And now we're just going to take that same stuff that we used earlier, the weeds, and this is a lighter color because the green is just way too monotone to look like a proper tree. So we're going to sprinkle a little bit of this on it to give it some variation in the type of leaves that are on there. That some are dying, some are older. Pull this little extra piece off. Try to move that up there. Now you can adjust these slightly because these are like a real product, so you want to try to find one in the box that's as close to looking like a tree as possible. So this one looks pretty decent right here, and might even put a little more foliage down on here, and we'll make a few of these now and put them over the rest of the diorama. And once we decide where we want the tree to go, I'm just using a flat screwdriver, poking a hole into the foam, and we'll just put the tree into place there, and we'll fix it with a little bit of white glue, kind of get it to the direction that we want first, and now we'll glue it into place. And I'm going to do that over the rest of the diorama as well with a few other trees. We've also taken some of our fine leaf foliage and done the exact same thing as when we were making the trees, but these little shorter ones would look more like bushes, and we've got them kind of hanging over the edge of the hillside here, leading just over the water. And looking at a lot of pictures of European streams, a lot of this is pretty common to have it where it's grown right to the edge and starts to actually grow right over the side of the water. And you can also see that we have a little German soldier hiding out in there, right up on the hillside in his camouflage smock. Blends in pretty well in there. So I've let the stream set up now for a couple hours. It's not 100% dry, but it's dry enough to the touch. There's still a few little areas that need to completely go clear and see through, and that'll take a few more hours, possibly even overnight, to get it fully that way. But now that we're at that point, you can really see the water and the motion that it appears inside there, that as if it's moving downstream. Now that that area is set up, we don't have to worry about damaging it. We're going to take some of our Vallejo pigments, and I'm going to be using two different ones, the Desert Dust as well as the Light Sienna, which I use so often in the tracks that I do. And I've started to do it in through here, just taking a soft brush. We're kind of blotting it into some of the sides of the areas that we want to appear to be a little bit drier than some of the other areas around. We also want to put it around to give it some highlights to the roads as well as down in here. And it's simple enough, just taking a little bit on the brush and just start blending it in. And this is just, like I said, going to create some areas that look a little bit drier, give it a little bit contrast so everything's not so monotone. And those colors are obviously completely up to you, however you want your diorama to look. I'm doing a little bit in here, and I'll do a little bit along the road as well as on the outside of the road too, as if it's just a little bit drier out there, not to mention the other side of the road as well. So far I think it's coming along pretty well. Like I said, we have a few more hours to wait on drying of that, and then we can do just some of the final little things to the actual base. So I finished up putting the pigments along the sides of the berm here, as well as the road leading just close enough to the water. I didn't want to get too dry near the water because that would still be kind of moist in through there. Kind of give you a little bit of a 360 view. I've got this thing teetering on my normally kind of small little turntable, but I think I've got it balanced enough to show you guys everything on here. Now, when I started this diorama off, I really didn't have any specific type of diorama I was making other than the scenery itself. Now, I did put tiger tracks in there because I just happen to have an extra set of tiger tracks, and it always looks cool to have a tiger in a diorama. Now, this is going to be more or less just be a display piece that I'm going to use for showing off other vehicles. If you wanted to attach the vehicle down, what I would recommend doing is taking some of the paste-like Vallejo mud and putting it all around the bottom down here, just mainly towards the bottom of the tracks, and then pushing it down into the pre-done tracks marks we've already done. A little bit of it will ooze out to the side, let it fully dry, and then you can go back over it with your Vallejo pigments like we did on the side here. That way it won't look like a wet mud because nothing else on this area is wet over in here. But it will give the vehicle the impression that it has some weight in it, that it's sinking into the ground. It's a 56-ton vehicle, so it's not going to be riding up on top of. But for our purposes right now, like I said, it was just more or less to show off doing scenery. Well, here we are. Here's our completed diorama, and I've got to say I had an absolute wonderful time building this. It was so much fun being creative, doing the hillside, the water, the grass, trees, all that kind of stuff. It did take a little bit longer, obviously, than a normal model kit to build. This is a couple of weeks work. I'm working on just a little bit here and there, and that's mainly because you put something down and then you're letting 6 to 8 hours sometimes or more of drying time for each thing. So, but definitely had a great time, and you'll be definitely seeing many more dioramas in the near future. And this is a quick note about that too. Many of you still ask about the train diorama. That is not getting built. It was going to be too large for my store, and actually I've sold all the train pieces off to a collector a while ago. So the next couple of dioramas that are going to come out are going to be this size or a little bit smaller, just so I can actually keep them in my store. So, also, for the next 30-45 seconds after I'm done talking, I took the diorama outside and filmed it in some natural light to let you see what natural shadows and stuff look on. It really adds a lot to it. So I want to thank you as always for watching, and please stay tuned because we have many more videos coming.